The Ohio governor's race gets personal, and what role should voters have in regulating data centers? Welcome to Columbus on the Record. I'm Mike Thompson. The race for Ohio governor has gotten personal in recent weeks. Republican Vivek Ramaswamy is out with a new ad where his wife shows off their new baby. In another ad, he goes after Democrat Amy Acton for her role in the COVID-19 shutdowns. Acton this week was left to explain an incident at her home in 2019. NBC was first to report that Bexley Police responded to a report of a domestic dispute between Acton and her husband. The report said the couple had a verbal argument and a mirror fell on the wall and shattered. The police report said there was no evidence of physical violence and no charges filed. Acton said it was an argument over her long work hours. Acton's campaign this week criticized Ramaswamy's campaign for making an issue of her seeking counseling for sexual abuse she suffered as a child. Stanley Gates, this has gotten ugly kind of fast. What's going on? Politics is always personal, but this has gotten pretty personal pretty quickly.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy is this is really a good thing for Amy Acton in the case that she doesn't have a primary opponent. This could be much messier if she had a primary opponent and then had to go into the November election. And so I think what's happening is this is a part of the modern politics. However, what you can see is that these elbows are getting thrown very early, which means that someone's feeling some pressure. And I think the Vivek camp is starting to see that. You know, I was thinking about it earlier this week, and this is kind of like the Rocky movie. When Rocky finally hits Apollo and Apollo realizes this is somebody I can't mess with. And I think Vivek is in that moment right now.
So the incident at Acton's house, Terry, was serious enough where police were called. So there was not nothing. But how big an issue is that? Should that be in the campaign?
It isn't going to be the big issue, but it raises questions as far as the judgment. And she rolled out her husband to tell Channel 4 here in Columbus that I was drinking more than my wife was drinking, so she didn't really have a drinking problem. So, but these are secondary issues. The big thing is both sides do opposition research. They look and see what's most salient. In some cases, they test it. So you're going to have these kind of things. Some will be important, some won't be important. But as I remember, Sherrod Brown, when he tried to get reelected Secretary of State, he was going to take a trip over to Japan, and sayonara Sherrod became the magic word that really locked in. So at some point, some of these personal issues, either way, could become effective and important.
And the commonality between these two candidates, Jesse, is they're new to politics. I mean, I know Ramaswamy ran for president briefly, but he's been a private business person. Amy Acton had her role during the DeWine administration, but she's largely been a private person. So this is new to them. This hardball politics.
It's true. And I think that's exactly why you're seeing some of this, is because both candidates are trying to define who their opponent is before their opponent has a chance to do it for themselves. And so, unfortunately, you're seeing this pretty early in the race. But I think to Stanley's point, it shows that this could be a pretty competitive one in Ohio, perhaps even more competitive than I would have thought last year.
Now, Stanley, Ramaswamy's campaign is accusing Acton of taking comments out of context, where he said that Acton has no vision other to complain about what someone else did to her. Acton said that he's mocking my report that I had suffered sexual abuse. And is this game being played both ways?
I think it's getting played both ways. And again, I think that this is just the start of it. I mean, they are not officially challengers and also the nominees from each party. And I think it's just going to get more and more messy as we get.
And I think you summarized it well. Things being taken out of context in politics, so what else is new? But in reality, if you're smart, if you throw an issue that's too complicated and too confusing, it ends up falling nowhere. But it's finding that thing that's understandable, and the best thing is if it reinforces something where they've already seen news coverage about it. So
now, he did write a book, Ramaswamy did write a book called A Nation of Victims, where he says we're all playing the victim card. So it doesn't take a huge leap to say he was equating her victimhood to this complaint.
Right, but sooner or later we're going to shift back to what I think is going to be the key issue is she's proposed a lot of new programs, things for child care, things for schools, more funding, but it's going to have to answer where do you get the money, where does it come from? And both candidates are going to talk about property taxes, but where are they really at, where do you cut, where do you save money. But ultimately, it's the wallet, it's the economy, and taxes. That's what drives voters.
Stanley, that was my next question. By focusing on these sort of salacious, maybe personal issues, this tit for tat stuff, it hurts Amy Acton because she just wants to hammer affordability and the cost of everything, right?
No, I don't think it does. But what I do think hurts is that the fact that voters just want to hear about the issues. You know, folks don't want to hear about the petty politics. People want to understand, how are you going to make my bills more affordable? How are you going to make sure that this economy does not take me out of the home that I've had? And how can I age in place? That's what people care about. People do not care about all the messy and petty politics right now.
One issue that has come up in the campaign, Jesse, and it's a legitimate issue, is the role that Amy Acton played in the earliest days of the COVID shutdowns. And the ad blames Acton for closing the polls or canceling the election in March of 2020. And Governor DeWine came to her defense this week.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really interesting because Amy Acton's signature might be on a lot of these orders, but it was made as kind of a collaborative conversation with Governor Mike DeWine, obviously a Republican, saying that these were my calls, these were my decisions. In the case of the election, you had sign off from both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party at the time. You had the Secretary of State, also a Republican, saying, we have to do this for the health of our citizens. And so by attacking Amy Acton on this issue, you're kind of attacking some Republicans as well.
That's my question, Terry. Everyone Amy Acton made her name, became very high profile because of COVID. She got rave reviews from most people. Now, there were some people, especially on the far right, that didn't want anything shut down, that hated her. They still do. But I just wonder how this plays going forward. She had a lot of goodwill. She was well thought of. People don't want to talk about the pandemic start, but I mean, this could cut both ways.
Well, going back to 21, in the spring, the real dividing point between the legislature and a lot of other people was in the spring, she did not want the fairs, county fairs across Ohio, in the rural areas in the summer and the fall to reopen. And other people, including the legislature, said, wait a minute, this is a killer. The fairs are open, they're outdoors. We can't continue being shut down too long. So there was a tension that developed, including involving the governor, who wanted to reopen sooner than what she wanted open. So there is an issue of when did you reopen, what did you keep closed down, that'll come back and be discussed some more.
All right. In the race for U.S. Senate, former Senator and now Democratic challenger Sherrod Brown has a big lead in fundraising over Jon Husted. Brown raised nearly $10 million in the first 3 months of this year. That's more than triple the amount raised by Jon Husted. Brown has $16.5 million on hand, which is double what Husted's campaign has. Husted, however, has gotten promises from the national GOP Senate campaign organization that it will spend up to $80 million to help the Republican incumbent. Terry Casey, why is Jon Husted having a hard time raising money, at least keeping up with Sherrod Brown?
Well, Sherrod Brown's got an established national base, including people from California, the East Coast, and everywhere, who was on his list because he, I think, raised or put together about $250 million when he ran in 24. So it's natural he'd have an advantage, but ultimately they're both going to have a lot of money. I think the bigger thing to watch in this Senate race is Jon Husted's almost pitching himself as the challenger, the outsider. I haven't been in D.C. for 3 or 4 decades. I'm the new guy. And right now, against D's and R's, the public's not happy with incumbent office holders and wants some change. So watching that challenger versus incumbent positioning will, I think, be the key thing in this race.
But Stanley, Sherrod Brown is tying Jon Husted to Donald Trump and Donald Trump's, policies in Iran, which has led to higher gas prices, and tariffs, which have led to higher prices in other areas.
Yeah, and I think that that's exactly what he and also Amy Acton, I think we're going to see a wave of folks. I hope that it's a blue wave, but I think at the end of the day, what people are seeing is they're tired of what's happening in Washington, and I think Sherrod's playing on that. He's playing on it very well, and I think, that's something that we can't get away from. He's making a statement with that fundraising dollars, and I think that we are going to see, to Terry's point, a lot more dollars come into this race. This is not going to be something that just ends where we are right now in April and October. We're going to see much more of this gap closing.
So Jon Husted faces the same headwinds that a lot of Republican Senate candidates. I look at around the country. John Cornyn in Texas has raised just $2.5 million. Susan Collins, $2.9 million. Same as Jon Husted. And those are established Republican incumbents that they're still lagging Democrats in their fundraising.
Yeah, I'd say what's interesting about Jon Husted is despite being in politics for decades in Ohio, he's been lieutenant governor, secretary of state, the former Ohio House Speaker. He's maybe not a name that the average Ohioan has heard of. These are not positions where maybe you're on the headlines every day. You're kind of number two to Mike DeWine for the past several years. And so being able to define himself once again, whether that be tying himself to Trump and Trump's policies or as his own person, he is going to have to introduce himself a bit to the Ohio voter.
Yeah, that was a question I had for you, Terry. Does Jon Husted have a Rob Portman problem? Very well-known, capable politician, long career, but the average person, he's not the most exciting guy. The average person doesn't know who he is.
Well, there'll be a contrast of the newer, younger, fresher face versus the guy that was there forever. And again, if they don't, nothing else, a lot of people are itching for some change. And then on the whole Trump thing, obviously the good news for Jon Husted and Republicans is the election is not in early May. It's 6.5 months away. And in today's news cycle and today's political cycle, things can change dramatically in a month, but 6.5 months is an eternity.
So that's the question for you, Stanley. Does Sherrod Brown have a Sherrod Brown problem in that people do know him very well? He's been here a long time. He's not that fresh face. He's coming off a loss, so it's hard to bounce back from that. How does he overcome that?
I think he overcomes it pretty well. I mean, I think that 2 years ago was very unique in the fact that Trump was at the top of the ticket. I think he has a unique advantage right now with the economy, albeit 6 months from now, much later. But at the end of the day, I think that he has an advantage. One thing I think that's going to be something that he's going to have to be mindful of is he ran 2 years ago, he's running now, and if he wins, he'll be running again in 2 more years. And so that'll be under another presidential election. And so we'll see how tough he is, but Sherrod's always been someone that's been battle tested through the state.
All right. It is a long shot, but voters could have the chance to ban large data centers in Ohio. A group looking to ban them is collecting signatures. It's very much a volunteer grassroots group that must collect hundreds of thousands of signatures by July to get on the November ballot, but it's out there, and many people remain wary of data centers and their impact on farmland, water supplies, and electric rates. Governor DeWine said this week that state lawmakers, not voters, should be the ones to write the rules and restrictions on data centers. He said, that's why we have a legislature. So my question to you is, Jesse, how much is the legislature chomping at the bit to regulate data centers?
I think data centers have been such a fascinating issue politically because it just doesn't cut along traditional lines. You have some Republicans who love these things because of, the growth of business. They want to attract that kind of those kind of businesses to the state. You have other Republicans who hate them because their voters in the rural areas are very concerned about them popping up and not getting any sort of tax benefit for the area. And then the other side, you have the Democrats who building data centers is union jobs. And so it's very hard for Democrats to say, no, we don't want union jobs in Ohio. And then on the other hand, you have, environmental concerns or kind of in my backyard concerns. And so you're not seeing, regular politics on this issue.
So what's a lawmaker to do, Terry?
Well, the lawmakers did pass, but the governor vetoed an effort that would have taken away one of the sales tax breaks that they enjoy. So there's some divisions, and I think this is going to be an issue that's going to grow bigger and bigger, and you're going to find out the candidates for governor, if they're smart, are going to say they need to pay more of their fair share because the amount of tax breaks they've got, the other advantages that they've had, it's going to have to be tightened down. But the other good news, as I said a number of months ago, more and more of these plants, and we're watching the big Piketon plant down there, $33 billion, that's going to generate more energy. So some of these issues will get solved, but still it's a big issue because a lot of people just don't understand why so few jobs out of something so big. But again, construction unions love it because it's big, full employment for them.
So.
And I don't think a lot of people at this point have come to a stance or a platform on it. I mean, I think people are still trying to develop that. The House did pass a bill to be able to commission a study. And so we'll see what actually comes out of that. The Senate will probably take action sometime before the end of the year. But I think that's also why voters are pushing the ballot initiative. People want to see something happen quicker than what's actually happened and don't really have time for a study.
Jesse, lawmakers have sort of gotten in the way of local government's approval of these projects. fracking, for instance, local communities cannot stop a fracking operation. I mean, if you want to put a fracking operation in downtown Dublin, Dublin cannot stop it, according to state law. But they can stop a wind farm at a local community. Is there anything that the state lawmakers might weigh in on what local communities can and cannot do on these data centers?
I think one thing that's kind of interesting that I'm looking at is there are a couple lawmakers that would want to ban non-disclosure agreements related to data centers and other large projects, because you're getting situations where like the mayor is agreeing to something but can't talk to even city council about it. These are public officials paid for by public tax dollars, and so there's a lot of frustration about the secrecy surrounding a lot of these projects. And so it'll be interesting if that gets some sort of movement in the legislature.
Are we being too hard on data centers, Terry? I mean, they are the jobs. We've talked about that, the construction jobs. And they're relatively clean. Even if they don't last 50 years, when they do go away, they're not going to have contaminants, at least not as much as like a steel factory or a chemical plant would have.
Well, but in the past, we used to be like with Honda or an auto plant, 5,000 jobs or 3,000 jobs. And when you talk to the mayor of New Albany and you say, you're giving them a tax break on $750 million of an asset, not paying property taxes, but they only employ 75 people. Where's the cost-benefit analysis? There's counter-arguments, but again, I think the prediction that there's going to be a tightening slowly is going to happen, but it's just going to take some time as we catch up to this.
We saw Sunbury said no data centers, at least till the end of next year, 27. Are we going to see more of that where some communities, let's face it, more wealthy communities, perhaps more rural communities say no data centers, and then they're forced into, communities that might be more desperate for that kind of, even the short-term construction jobs?
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see that. I mean, I think we're seeing it now, and that's also why, the legislator is getting this question, because local communities are trying to figure it out. The smaller ones, to your point, that are more affluent are making a stance and making it very clear. But then there are some that actually need that tax revenue, and also the jobs in particular.
Any evidence that these centers create other jobs? I know the centers themselves only employ a handful of people, but maybe another tech company moves next door.
Well, that's one of the big arguments in New Albany we'll point to. Now, New Albany was fortunate all these data centers were done east of where the main population is with a good bit of separation. But that's the argument of Sloan Spalding, the New Albany mayor, that it attracts in lots of other people that support, supply, do operations in connection with these. So there's a good argument. And also, are you going to be positioned for the future? Because data and technology is tomorrow's jobs. And if you aren't positioned, if you just turn your back on it, your state's going to be in bad shape.
All right. If Governor DeWine is going to go bold in his final months in office, some at the State House speculate it will involve the death penalty. DeWine, as a former prosecutor and a Southwest Ohio lawmaker, once strongly supported capital punishment in Ohio. Now, as governor, for nearly 8 years, no one on death row has been executed. No one executed during his terms as governor. DeWine blames the inability to get lethal injection drugs, but clearly DeWine has become increasingly uncomfortable with the state putting someone to death. He told reporters he will update us on his personal view on the issue after the May primary election. Jesse, any idea what he's going to say when he lets us know how he feels about this issue right now?
I mean, if I could bust out my truth serum for the governor right now, I suspect he is much less supportive of the death penalty than he previously was as either a county prosecutor or as Ohio Attorney General, where he investigated some pretty horrific crimes, including like the massacre in Pike County, which was, pretty made headlines internationally. The question is, how bold is he going to be? Is he just going to state his position? Is he going to take some sort of action? Is he going to ask lawmakers to act on this? And if he does, will lawmakers be receptive to it?
Why is he waiting, Terry, until after the May primary? It seems not a coincidence.
He doesn't want to stir the issue up for some people in some primaries for legislature. But on this issue, my son did a report back when he was in high school and interviewed Eve Stratton, then on the Ohio Supreme Court. She summarized this issue very well. It's a classic question of, do you believe in the Old Testament or do you believe in the New Testament? And I think Mike DeWine is much more on the New Testament side. The problem he's got is, as Matt Huffman, the House Speaker, summarized, he is not interested in removing the death penalty from the books of Ohio. And there's a lot of prosecutors, like a Ron O'Brien, when he was prosecutor, will tell you it helps get some deals on some cases. And also, how do you protect police officers, prison guards, people that are already under life sentences from doing free killings if there's no additional penalty?
The fact that he's waiting till after the primary means that there's some Republicans who are wavering. So this could pass the legislature if he were to call for a ban, right, Stanley? Is that what Democrats are hoping, or opponents of death penalty?
I mean, I think so. I mean, you folks are waiting at this point and have been waiting. I mean, this is not the first time that Governor DeWine has said he's going to come out doing this announcement. I think people are waiting and, wanting him to take bold action. I know that folks were definitely looking for something to happen at his State of the State. They were looking for a bold announcement, and that did not happen. And so I think, Democrats are in particular waiting and trying to see if he's going to be bold in this last few months of his term and commute these sentences and take a stance.
Could he, Jesse, could he say, I support the death penalty, but only for these very rare cases? You kill a police officer, or, it's going to be hard to differentiate, especially when a lot of folks who have been convicted of very serious, terrible crimes are later exonerated, where, it's either all or nothing, right? Either support it or you don't.
He's the governor. He can take any stance that he wants to on this. But to your point, you get a bit of an ethical dilemma. Like, is one killing acceptable or worse than another killing? Is it worse if you kill this type of profession versus this other type of profession? That's where it gets a little dicey.
But I've done focus groups on this issue, and when you ask people, even who are opposed to capital punishment, about child killers and some of these people that are really far extreme and got prison guards, police officers, even people opposed to capital punishment look at it differently. So there's a lot of shades to this issue, but again, the General Assembly is not in any hurry to do anything.
Jesse, he's taken flack from other officials, namely Dave Yost, who calls it a mockery that we haven't had any executions over the past several years because of whether it's the lethal injection, drug shortage, or just Mike DeWine's unwillingness to push the envelope.
Yeah, we've been in limbo on this issue for the entirety of Mike DeWine's governorship. And so if you support capital punishment, it is on the books. It is a law in Ohio, and they would like to get on with it. If you're opposed, you're like, well, let's just get rid of it entirely. So we are just kind of sitting in the middle right now.
One thing I do think to just bring to the table, though, is, how does your legacy look if you do just all of a sudden come out and say you are pro-capital punishment while these folks have been sitting for several years? How does that look? And I think that that's also something that Governor DeWine needs to take into account.
And for the next governor, the way this table is set up right now, it could be whoever is the new governor is going to have almost every month after month, execution scheduled. And then there's the whole question of getting the pharmacy medicine in order to do the implementation.
They won't have month after month of executions, Terry, if Governor DeWine commutes all the sentences to life in prison. What are the odds in your mind of that?
I'd say slim and none, because Dick Celeste did some of that similar that way, and it hung around, and a lot of people didn't like that. So there might be. He's not
going to be governor anymore. Does he care about?
Well, he's got a son who's on the Ohio Supreme Court, and he's very concerned and interested about his legacy. So I think he's a very measured person. I think what he'll do, he'll say his opinion, but I think it'll be narrowly focused.
How about other alternative methods? Would he propose that? That's talk about the other way. So we should bring back, the gas chamber, firing squads, or
no,
hangman's noose.
So.
Nope.
No,
I don't think so. But maybe he does do what you suggested, and he commutes some based off of the crime, and then kind of looks at it that way.
I can see him maybe multiple killings, no, but one murder, yes. It's like you said, it's an ethical dilemma. What crime is worth versus another crime? Anyway, it's time now for our final off-the-record parting shots. Stanley Gates, you're up first. It's
been almost a year since I've been on the show, so I'm just happy to be here and very thankful for the opportunity. Shout out to my mentor, Derek Clay.
Yes, he recommended you. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Terry.
The good news for Ohio State University is probably in next week's NFL draft, 4 of the top 10 are going to come from Ohio State. But the bad news was this week, the New York Times did a very detailed dive into Ohio State and said it's got a few problems as they went through the turnover in presidents, the various legal disputes, all the other kind of things happen on campus. But it's an interesting read that's not new to us, but it's new to a lot of people around the country.
All right, Jesse.
This week I took a fun look at the more than 200 days, months, and weeks of commemoration in the state. And so, happy Superman Day or Rascal Flatts Day to those who celebrate.
March is Lawnmower Repair Maintenance Month, in case you were wondering. Anyway, my off-the-record comment is on Monday, we start really a month-long project here. It's called Inside Reshaping Work. We're going to look at the changing economy, all the things we're facing, AI, skilled workforce demand, the role of immigrants in our workforce. Amy Jurovich, on All Sides with Amy Jurovich, will have a show Monday at 11, kicking off the project, and it will culminate with a town hall meeting in this studio coming up in early to mid-May. So keep an eye on for that, and you can see all that at our website, called wosu.org/inside. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. A reminder to check out the WOSU News YouTube channel, our channel there. You can see and share every episode of this program and a lot more stuff from WOSU News. Go to YouTube, search WOSU News. And you can also watch us on demand at wosu.org and on the PBS app. For our crew and our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.